Welcome to Movie RX, where I prescribe entertainment one movie at a time. I am your host, Dr. Benjamin, MD. What does the MD stand for today? I'm just going to go with Movie Doctor. I think that's all I'm going to do today is just Movie Doctor.
Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah, anticlimactic today. That's okay. I don't mind. As you can hear today, I have my guest logging in remote from her office today. One half of Roundtable Mindset, my sister, Jamie. Welcome back, Jamie.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Hello.
All right. So today's movie is actually kind of timeless, even though a sign of the times kind of thing is one of the things that we're talking about in it. But people who have never seen this movie quote from this movie.
That's so true.
I mean, it's kind of crazy how influential this movie can be to people who have never seen it. I mean, as even Jack Nicholson, this is probably one of his most famous roles, which says something because of how many things Jack Nicholson has been in.
Well, and how small his role was in this. Like, it wasn't
right.
huge. It was pretty small.
He wasn't, yeah, but it's one of those iconic things that when you think of Jack Nicholson, it's always, here's Johnny and you can't handle the truth, So, I mean, it's just kind of, it's crazy how big this movie is. But today we're talking about A Few Good Men. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into the basic info on it. We got released in 1992, directed by Rob Reiner, which, I mean, if Rob Reiner directs a film, it's going to be a good film. About the only thing he's ever done that I didn't care for was This Is Spinal Tap, but that's just because Spinal Tap is garbage. I'm just saying.
See, I'm now suddenly going to be looking up Rob Reiner because I feel like he do a bunch of
Let me save you the trouble. Many of his movies are going to be on my podcast at some point. I'm going to give you 4 of them besides this movie: Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, and Misery.
See, this is why I had to look this up, because I'm like, okay, Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride. I mean, don't get me started on how iconic that movie is for me. But like, then this one is not, I wouldn't have expected this one. I don't know if I've seen Spinal Tap.
This Is Spinal Tap is, you would hate it.
Oh, okay.
It's not really a movie if we're being honest.
Okay. Well, is that a prescription not to watch that?
That is I am Little Gray. No, not Little Gray. Who's McDreamy?
McDreamy?
Yeah.
It's Dr. Sloan.
No, I thought he was McSteamy.
The plastic surgeon. Oh, McDreamy. Oh, yeah, that's Dr. Shepard.
Okay, so Shepard's little sister, Little Shepard, how she's against opiates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you...
I am Little Shepard.
Okay. Saying this is an opiate?
To Spinal Tap, saying don't use it. It's awful and it should be banned from movies. I'm just saying.
That was all so random.
Well, I'm just proving that I don't just watch movies. I watch some TV too.
I'll tell you what, you want to do a Grey's breakdown, I am here for that. Like 40 times. I'm here for that.
I would totally have an episode of a podcast about TV shows, about Grey's Anatomy, but I mean, the biggest thing I'd have to do it about is the soundtrack. The music that they pick for Grey's Anatomy is pretty epic.
Did you know? Okay, this is so off topic, and you can totally cut this out in post-production. If this ends up on the editing room floor, I'm fine with it. But every episode is named after a song.
There's a lot of shows that do that, actually.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This show has been on since like the year my children were born. Okay. Like literally it started in 2004. So that's a lot. That's a lot of shows to be. It's a lot of creativity. I'm just saying.
A lot of song titles.
That's a lot of iTunes hours.
So yeah, Rob Reiner films. And then now the cast. Holy cow. What a cast. The major three, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, and Kevin Pollak as the attorneys.
The dream team.
Yeah. And then you've got Jack Nicholson, of course, Kiefer Sutherland, Noah Wyle, Cuba Gooding Jr., and none other than the Kevin Bacon. With that kind of a cast, this is an essential part of winning 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like, if you don't know this movie and its cast, then you are neglecting your ability to win that game.
Yes. And for those of you who are born probably before 1980 something, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon is a game.
Yeah, I'd actually thought about doing that a couple of times on the podcast, just having people send random people, and then I can do the thing.
6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon. I think you should make that like a little subsect of your podcast. Every single one. If you can run it down to 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, that's like showing off.
No, I can do it. Like I was able to connect John Wayne.
What?
I was able to connect John Wayne to Kevin Bacon.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm not going to reveal my secrets.
Well, now that I see the whole list of Rob Reiner movies, I would have never guessed this was one of them, but I suppose that would be another. You could probably do 6 Degrees to Rob Reiner too.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All roads to Rob Reiner lead through Tom Cruise. Not Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks.
Yes. Yes, definitely Tom Hanks.
Ooh,
okay,
we should do a Tom Hanks movie next.
Actually, one that I was thinking about seeing if I could find somebody that wanted to do it with me is Road to Perdition.
That's a great film.
That is a fantastic movie.
Oh my gosh.
First off, Tom Hanks is arguably a bad guy. Like, I mean, he's not a real bad guy, like, because he's one of those tragic good guys, but I mean, he's a killer. So, I mean, he's a bad guy, but it's still, I don't know. It's weird.
I haven't seen that movie in so long, and now you've made me want to go watch it again. So that might be my Sunday afternoon.
Oh, and the music in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so good. Anyway, so back to this one.
Back to this amazing movie.
We've got, I'm going to do things a little funny today. I've got the IMDb description, which is a military lawyer, Lieutenant Daniel Caffey, defends Marines accused of murder. They contend that they were acting under orders. The Amazon description, a young Navy lawyer risks his career to uncover the truth during a military trial. Yeah.
Wait,
so
I thought there was more to it than that.
Now we're going to try something. I think you just want too much.
I guess.
Because most places, that's the kind of description you get. And it isn't until I have to go to one of the biggest travesties in the movie culture. I have to go to Rotten Tomatoes to get something that I think that you would approve of.
Okay. I'll take it.
Okay. Lieutenant Daniel Caffey, Tom Cruise, is a military lawyer defending 2 U.S. Marines charged with killing a fellow Marine at the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba. Although Caffey is known for seeking plea bargains, a fellow lawyer, Lieutenant Commander Joanne Galloway, Demi Moore, convinces him that the accused Marines are most likely carrying out an order from a commanding officer. Caffey takes a risk by calling Colonel Nathan Jessup, Jack Nicholson, to the stand in an effort to uncover the conspiracy.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd have to go to what is probably the serial killer of the movie culture. Rotten Tomatoes. The worst thing to happen to movies. Rotten Tomatoes is where I'd have to go to get Jamie approved movie descriptions.
See, I think that you should write your own movie description.
Maybe.
Give enough details for listeners who maybe even listeners that haven't seen the movie in a while, because that was kind of me. When we decided on this movie, I haven't seen it in a long time. I mean, I've seen it 100 times, so it's not like this is one of Doyle's like rinse and repeats, right? So we watched this. This is on. I've caught probably the entire movie 15 times in a year because I catch different pieces as he's watching it over and over again. But if I haven't seen the movie for a long time, something that will spark my memory to be like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
You know, for movie people, this has what we call replay value.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is a movie that you can do that. You can watch it over and over again. And I think that a lot of the reason why that's possible with this movie is because of the catharsis that you get in it in a lot of different ways. And I think we'll kind of get to that a little bit more later. As far as initial movie impressions go, like, you know, the typical things that people look for in movies, technically, what's not to love about this movie? I mean, the cinematography was pretty textbook because it's Rob Reiner, but there were a few areas with some really good hard shots, like the sunrise at Gitmo at the very beginning. Some of those pictures in Guantanamo Bay, the sunrise and all of that stuff, that was a pretty epic look, you know, and those aren't easy shots to get. The dark shots that are kind of all over the movie, the scene in the car with Markinson, when Markinson scares the shit out of Tom Cruise. You know, I mean, that's another really good scene that shows really good camera work. So the music was very clearly freshly cut out of the 80s.
Well,
with 1992, they still hadn't let go of some of that, you know, that synthesizer sound.
well, and a lot of it too was like patriotic. You know what I mean? It was very military
Right.
heavy. So there was lots of, you know, I feel like that was the music I was more remembering was, you know, in the beginning with the
with the
military
horns
band
and all of that.
That kind of thing.
I think one of the things that stands out the most about this movie is all of the powerful performances that hit like a freight train. I mean, especially from Cruise and Nicholson. Oh my God, those two facing off in the courtroom at Gitmo, like every time those two come together on screen, you just get this sense of that all of nature is coming to war with itself. It's just great.
Well, and that
so
clash of generation too. I mean, you've got the commander. What was his title? I suck at military titles. I'm not gonna. Yeah.
No, he was a colonel.
Colonel. See, I suck at military titles, so let me just
Colonel is
now.
the highest rank that you can get before general.
Okay. Well, Colonel Jessup was definite old school, not just old school military, but old school Marine, right? Like, and I don't know a ton about the military, but I do know that the Marines are a different level. I mean, it's a whole different thing. Like, it's a whole different culture. And then you have that natural, because it was JAG, right? Which is naval.
Well, okay. So the JAG, Judge Advocate General, is Marine lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
They had Navy lawyers. They had Air Force lawyers. I mean, everybody was represented in this thing except for the Coast Guard, because everybody forgets the Coast Guard.
Wait, what's the Coast Guard? I'm totally kidding.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Totally kidding.
We love the Coast Guard.
I know about the Coast Guard because of Deadliest Catch.
Oh, fair enough.
They like save their butts on a regular.
Kevin Bacon, Jack Ross, he's an attorney for the Marines.
Right.
And that's because the Marines are the ones that press charges on their own. They can't be pressing charges and be defending at the same time. I mean, even though Marines probably could, you give them a gun and a shield and they can do both jobs because that's a Marine.
They think so.
But legally they can't do that.
Well, and I'll be the first to admit that there were lots and lots of technical pieces. And also, I guess, let me say that I am well aware that this was dramatized for movie viewing pleasure. So I'm sure there's lots of things that, you know, aren't real and aren't accurate. And it's, you know, it's a story. But
I'm pretty sure that Tom Cruise would have been tackled about 24 times with how many times he approached without permission. Yeah.
But, well, and that was the thing. Like, I have a sense that my thought process is that a military court runs a little differently even than, you know, like dramatized television court. And Tom Cruise did a fantastic job at dramatized television court. But I don't understand a lot of the inner workings of the thing. But one thing that I did see that. I did see, you know, all of the different branches represented. And what I appreciated is that I'm sure there's some reflection of reality in that. and the amount of thought that I think must have gone into our system to make sure that, to avoid corruption, really.
Mm-hmm.
How does a commanding officer, you know, defend and prosecute one of their subordinates? You know what I mean? So I think that the whole thing, I have such an appreciation, I think, for the process, and not just the process in the military setting, but I feel like this kind of gave me a really good, a better understanding of the legal process in general, and an appreciation for how the system is set up, and all the reasons for the rules and things like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and while a lot of it is kind of blown up a little bit to make things a little bit more interesting and everything, I don't feel like they misrepresented those things. I don't think so. Procedures definitely ignored, and some of those technicalities and everything, but this is also based off of a play, written by a person that imagined this happening, and the way that would translate for a movie maker like Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner would have to take a scene from a play and go, how can this better translate to film? Mm-hmm. Because those kind of things just work different by the time they get to celluloid, So next, I kind of wanted to talk about characters a little bit, and I've kind of grouped them up a little bit. And the first group I have is the Few. That's Caffey, Galloway, and Weinberg, the defense lawyers. The dynamic here is a lot of fun. Like when he finally decides that he's going to take it to trial, everybody has their place. Caffey, of course, is lead. Galloway she's kind of in charge of, making sure that they have the things that they need for, especially for like her one client. And then Weinberg, he's kind of in charge of research and witness prep, and they did a really good job there with how intense that time is. I mean, because they gave him 3 weeks to prepare. They plead not guilty. Okay, well, we'll be back in 3 weeks from today. Boom. Like, you think to yourself, 21 days, that's not too bad, right? Imagine putting two people's lives in your hands and having only three weeks to prepare for it.
I was going to say, I think there is this common perception that lawyers and probably even doctors and stuff, like, oh, must be rough, like makes $75 an hour. Or, I don't know. It's probably even more than that, quite frankly. But you have this perception that it's all like glamour and glitz. I'm confident that it's not. Like, I mean, if you think about it, and at one point they talked about like 20-hour days for the last, 3 or 4 weeks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but I think that's part of, to kick it back to Grey's Anatomy, you watch like doctors go through horrible losses and 18-hour surgeries and things like that. And I think this was a little bit of an insight into that too. Like, you've got two people who were doing their job and were on the line for murder. And that's a lot of responsibility. That's scary amounts of responsibility. And not everybody can handle that. You know what I mean? So a little less glitz and glamour, I guess. Yeah.
And well, I mean, and I felt the annoyance that Weinberg would have at Galloway often. The dismissal of Caffey on Galloway felt real. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, I think, is because that is very real stuff. That is all, like, I mean, imagine spending so much time with somebody for 3 weeks. You're going to get really annoyed with somebody like that,
Well, and on top of that, I feel like in that triangle of three people, you have Galloway, who's like rooting for these kids, right? And mm-hmm. really, they're kids. And then you have, what's his name?
Weinberg. Sam.
You have Sam over here who can't stand these guys and thinks that they should be rotting in jail for the rest of their lives. And then you have Tom Cruise, who is kind of a cocky kid himself, who enjoys the status of being a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So I feel like in that triangle, you kind of have the trifecta of like all of the reasons for personal strife in the workplace. Like,
Right.
you know,
Now, going from left to right in the courtroom, we had the few, the proud. I feel like this is not looked at enough in this movie. Judge Julius Alexander Randolph. The judge in this movie was awesome.
one of my favorite parts of the movie. Yes.
His ability to be like, okay, I will let you go with this, but it's a short leash. Like, you better get to where you're going fast. And I don't know. He just did a fantastic job. And I don't think anybody really ever recognizes him enough for it.
He was fair.
He was extremely fair.
Yeah.
Like, especially there at the end when Cruz and Nicholson were kind of, facing off. I don't know how it wouldn't have gotten to a point where somebody would have been like, objection, badgering the witness, like, because.
Oh, but it did. He was like, you're in contempt. Like, because I remember the two of them. What I didn't remember from past watching was the judge being like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough.
Right.
So yeah, he was in contempt. Of course, you don't see that at the end, what they do about the contempt.
Well, I mean, even then, like when he was really pressuring him, in a time where they could have said, you don't have to answer that. Judge Randolph even said, I want to hear the answer. Like, you may not think that it's important to what's going on here, but I feel that it is. So I want to hear an answer. And oh my God, that part where he's like, I don't know what kind of outfit you running out here. And he's like, oh, in this courtroom, you will refer to me as Your Honor. Like, yeah, that's good stuff right there. He did a really great job. So, the few, the proud, and now the Marines. Barnes, played by Noah Wiley. Hammaker, played by Cuba Gooding Jr. Ross, played by Bacon. Markinson, played by Walsh. Kendrick, played by Sutherland. Jessup, played by Nicholson. These guys, I can't believe how well this list of people made me believe that they were Marines.
Uh-huh.
None quite so much as Kendrick and Jessup.
Right.
Those two, I don't know. It's incredible. The characters.
Dawes too, though.
Dawes.
Yes.
Which one?
What?
Which one?
Well, there was Dawes and Downing and Dawes. Which one was? Well, both of them like lived and breathed the Marine Corps. You know what I mean?
Right.
They were very convincing as well, I felt.
Yeah. The whole thing. Ross is the prosecuting attorney for the Marine Corps. I mean, he's still a lawyer, so he still jumps into the lawyer ring when it comes to, sitting down and having a beer with Caffey. But the realism of being a Marine in that role, very a matter of fact. Like, I'm not going to screw around with this job, just like a Marine is with any job. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's nothing quite so chilling as the end of the whole thing when Jessup, when he realizes what's going on and that he's being arrested, and he turns around and he goes after Caffey, and he's like, you fucked with the wrong Marine. It's like that intensity was, it was so good.
Well, and it was so Marine.
It was very Marine.
I mean, not necessarily the threatening bodily injury to, someone that just made you really angry, but, that intensity of purpose.
Well, because it's not him. Like, no, you didn't come after me. You came after a Marine. Jessup did a really great job. Kendrick was also very convincing for me anyway. There might be some Marines out there that disagree with me, but I think that he did awesome.
From a layperson's perspective, yes, they were all super convincing. And
right.
Quite frankly, I think I don't know much about military things, but it made me, this movie, even with because there's some problems. I mean, there's some problems, and there's some scary problems, right? But at the same
Right.
time, like, it also like bolstered patriotism for me, like about our military and the job that they have, and a different perspective and understanding about the dedication and the sacrifice that it is to be part of the people that defend us. You know what I mean?
And that's what I was kind of talking about earlier with the whole, the things that this movie does every time. And I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing. Maybe it's just a boy thing. But there's something about this movie that whenever I watch this movie, it gives me this huge sense of pride of being an American, and the pride in the U.S. Marines and the armed forces that comes from this movie. Just like they said, we are the ones that stand between you and danger.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it makes me think every time, whenever I watch this movie, I always think to myself, how many other governments have planned something, or how many, organizations have planned something. And as they're going through the process of planning their whatever awful thing that they're planning, do they get to the point where they go, okay, so what happens after that? After that, we meet U.S. Marines. Okay, fuck that plan.
Yeah. Let's try something different.
How many times have mentioning the United States Marine Corps, has that stopped, some kind of thing from happening?
Mm-hmm.
Because honest to God, there is something that is just different about the Marines.
I'm positive,
and then realizing
that is
what they utilize from every other branch.
I'm positive that is embodied in that moment where Jack Nicholson is ready to rip Tom Cruise's head off his neck and
piss in his dead skull.
Well, because yeah, that was kind of like, I bet he could too. Oh, yeah. I bet he could. Like, yeah. Okay, sorry, sir. I think the other piece that like ignites that pride in, unit, corps, God, country,
mm-hmm.
is that you watch the system work.
Mm-hmm.
It was a, I don't know, 2-hour movie where you got to see that the system that's in place works. And the military it's that piece of protection, and then you get to see it intermingle with the Constitution and the legal system and, all of that. And it's just like, yes, that is why we have an incredible system. That's why our
mm-hmm.
system is incredible, because yes, it has flaws. Is it always perfect? No. Does it screw up I don't even know how often it screws up, but there's a system and it works. And that, I don't know. I think that that's a big piece of it too for me, is like, oh yeah, that's, this is what makes America, America,
Yeah. And a lot of that kind of comes in. I mean, at this time specifically, it's actually kind of a big deal. I mean, a lot of people are really kind of feeling that pride in the system and knowing that it works in the real world right now. I don't know how many posts I've seen of people saying my faith in the system has been bandaged because of what's happened today.
Mm-hmm.
In reference to the guilty on all charges, 34 counts.
34,
I don't remember what it was.
A lot.
It's coincidental is what it is, because like that, it totally wasn't planned, but like the movie that we wanted to do, and with what's kind of going on right now, that's just kind of how, I don't know, it meant a lot this time watching it.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I mean, some of the talking points we had when I went through and looked at our collaborative document for talking points and everything, I ended up just mostly taking most of your talking points because ours were so similar in so many different ways. The first one that you had down was morality versus the code. Tell me why you put that down.
Well, I think I think that this movie, and you kind of you watched it on screen, where two guys who clearly cared about the person that was dead, right? They called him Willie.
Yep.
That was their core mate. That was their, I think they were in the same unit. Or I don't know anything about the structure, but
I mean, Tom Cruise even told him, stop calling him Willie, because that makes him a kid with a mother.
Yeah.
Like
that makes him your buddy, right?
Yeah.
I think they were following orders, and they maintained that from the beginning. We were following orders. We were doing what we were told to do. And their friend, at the end of the day, their fellow Marine is dead, right? Because they followed orders. And this moral dilemma that must have been present for them. And I don't know that you saw that it was present for them until toward the end, right? Like, it just, that to me was a key point in the whole movie, is to really look at, what is being expected of me, and what do my values and ethics say about that? And is following through with this thing, if it doesn't follow my morals and ethics and values, what do I do with that? How do I manage that, and how do I balance that? And so, yeah, I don't know that it was like super life-changing, other than to really ask those questions and give me an opportunity to reflect on that and say, okay, what would I do if I were in that spot? Would I follow orders? And why is it different? This is another question that it brought up for me. Why is it different if it's a fellow Marine than it is if it is a declared enemy of the United States, right? Like, there's some moral challenges and ethical questions in that for me too. Like, if I were, and this is probably why it's good that I'm not a serviceman, but if I were sent to a war zone and told to go and secure something at any cost, you were to go secure whatever it is that you're supposed to secure, and there's women and children there, what do you do with that, And how hard that must be for our servicemen and women who are doing these, participating in these missions and doing these things that I know zero things about, and how lucky I am that I don't have to know about that.
Because there are people who have taken that upon themselves.
Because there are people who know those things that I get to sleep at night, and would I be able to sleep at night if I did know those things? I'm not sure, and yeah, I think that there's so many moral and ethical questions in doing that kind of work, that it was really kind of impactful to see it play out on a screen, and be able to give myself that space to ask those questions, and to recognize the difficulty in that for the people around me who serve.
Right. For me, like the morality versus the code, following orders or following your heart, I suppose. For me, it's different, like depending on where it is. Like in a military setting, Jessup was right. If you have people who are not following orders, then people die. The irony there is that people followed his orders and people died. And that just kind of, that's due to corruption in the system. But when we're faced with a situation that's life and death, then yes, orders are imperative to be followed. And even if there is corruption above you, you have to trust that the people that are above you are making the right decision.
That it's for a greater good, right?
Yes.
I mean, and yeah, that is. And what's interesting is how you can take that from that macro level and think about it on that huge place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I get that we have to trust the people that are in charge. We have to trust the people that are in charge, from the commander in chief all the way down to generals and, colonels and down, right?
All the way down to a lance corporal.
Yes. We have to be able to trust that they are making decisions that may, in our view, look like it's not for the greater good or for the needs of the many, or not for the needs of the one, but for the many, and that kind of thing. But even to take it down to my own relationship at my house, you know, and to know like at some point somebody has to make the move. Somebody has to make a decision. And what does that look like? And how do you negotiate that? And, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about when you pull it down to like, do you work for someone that you trust? Do you work for someone that you know is above reproach when it comes to ethics and values and doing the right thing for the most people? You know what I mean? It's just kind of an interesting way to look at that.
Right. Something that I don't know, I feel like it deserves a little bit more examination. At one point, Sam and Kaffee are talking, and Kaffee says, "So you don't believe them, and you think that they should go to jail for the rest of their lives?" And Sam says, "I believe every word of their story, and I feel they should go to jail for the rest of their lives." And the reason why I mark that down is because just in the span of a half a second, my opinion coincided with his, went against his, and then went back to being with his.
And then lined up again, right?
about 15 times in the span of about half a second.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I agree with him, but I disagree.
Mm-hmm.
He believes every word of their story, but feels like they should go to jail for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
The phrase that keeps coming up in my head is they were following orders.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that comes up immediately after that every time is, but a man is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to answer for that.
Well, and I think, again, that also, they kind of went into that a little bit in their scene, too, as they were getting started, like intent and motive and things like that, you know? And that was, I think that is the dilemma, is, you know, that was not their intention. They didn't intend to kill the guy. What they intended to do was to gag him and teach him that it is unit, core, God, country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you went way above unit, core, God, and country when you went outside to say, I can't do this anymore. And by the way, there's a bad guy here. You know, this thing happened that nobody knows about, and I do. And so it's hard because you see these two kids that are like, but we just were doing what we were told to do, and we didn't try to do this. The guy was sick. He had some physical problems that caused him to die when most likely the rest of the unit wouldn't have.
Under
Anyone
normal
else.
circumstances. Yeah.
Does it make it okay? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was
because a man is still dead.
Yeah. It was military hazing. I mean, literally it was military hazing. And I think what's interesting, and I don't know that this was something, I'm trying to remember, because I feel like I was in 6th or 7th grade when this movie came out. So I was pretty young. But I do remember later, like in the 90s and early 2000s, and even into not too terribly long ago, this has been a big topic of conversation when it comes to managing the military, is how do we treat our soldiers? And is that causing more damage and more harm unnecessarily? And so I feel like they have done a lot to look at this issue and to look at these kind of things. I am positive. Does hazing and code red and those kind of things still happen? Probably. But I do think systematically they've done work on it. They've worked hard to make sure that our servicemen and women are not being harmed by the service and, you know, by the system. So I think I don't know if it came from this movie, but maybe it pointed it out.
There's been a lot of change in the military for like over the longest span of time. Everything from, well, I mean, even just the way that they train soldiers has changed significantly. Like, I mean, at one time they trained soldiers to be killers. I want you to be a killer. I want you to be a murderer mindset and go out and do your job and be a killer. And it evolved over time to where it was to be a machine. don't feel anything about what you're doing, just do what you're told. I mean, and so the way that they teach soldiers how to do those things has evolved quite a bit. And I think a lot of that has had in mind the way that things end up when they come back
Mm-hmm.
from the service. I mean, because what happens when you train somebody to be a killer and they go out and they be a killer and then they come home and they can't be a killer no more? Then you have somebody who's having this existential crisis, trying to figure out how to come to terms with that, and reacclimating into society. So, I mean, just the way that they change things over time. I think that it was probably, I don't think it had anything to do with this movie. I'm sure that a lot of that, trying to curb the hazing and stuff.
I
think that a lot of that, right. I think that a lot of that kind of, we're evolving as humans, if not physically. We are definitely evolving, intellectually.
Well, and I think some of that was pointed out so clearly to me in knowing when this was happening, right? When this movie came out was around, I think it was around the time that like the Don't Ask, Don't Tell stuff was big.
Yeah.
You could see how women were so discriminated against and sexually harassed in the military in this movie. It was disgusting in a couple spaces.
Yeah. That worst one. I don't know that any of them are really any worse than the next, but the one where I literally physically wanted to punch somebody was when he was out by the softball field.
Yeah.
And she goes and he's like, "You don't even know me." And then she goes, and I mean, what she was doing was totally a power move, where, she read his whole file and memorized it, and she starts spouting it back at him. And then he just sits there and stares at her and goes, "Wow, I am aroused." And it's like, you fucking pig.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, of course, when the movie was made, even when the movie was made, that was like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't imagine something like that happening now.
Well, and even the fact that she felt the need to make these power moves. You saw her walk into an office of men, her commanding officers, all men, and diminish and dismiss her so quickly for this young hotshot 9 months in the service attorney. Just completely dismissed her, passed over her and overlooked her completely. She was wearing skirts because that was standard issue.
Wasn't until 2021 before all branches had alternatives.
Was that only? I knew it wasn't long ago, but my goodness.
No, but Jag is a little different. I mean, they've had pants available for a lot longer, but I mean, I don't know what the regulations were or anything, but the Marines have done really good about making sure that women know that both options are perfectly acceptable.
Well, can I just tell you, I was in marching band.
Okay.
I was not just in marching band. I was the drum major of the marching band. Okay.
Me too.
Yeah. I was so disgusted at the schools that had their drum majors listed as drum majorettes if they were women, if they were girls. Yeah. They had batons if they were girls, and they wore skirts if they were. I was so disgusted by the backwoods thinking, like that's
how that had to be.
Yes, because I was a drum major. I was not a drum majorette, and I wore the exact same uniform as every other person in our band, and I am totally well aware that band and military are two very different things. However, in high school, you are taught to believe unit, corps, God, country, right? I mean, there is a code to marching band, and you live marching band above all things.
Right. And that is your unit.
Yes.
And drum and bugle corps is corps.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, I say that jokingly. I'm well aware that my service and time in marching band was an extracurricular activity and this is not. But at the same time, like, how is it that in 1994, 95, 96, and 97, I had enough brains in my head to say, I do not have, I mean, if I choose to wear a skirt and want to be a drum majorette, then okay, that's cool. Let me choose that. But there were schools where they automatically chose drum majorettes. They didn't ever
Right.
have a drum major. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
How was our military in that space where women had to wear skirts because they were women and they were, blatantly and outwardly sexually harassed on a regular basis? And that is just what we saw in this movie. That has nothing to do with the actual discrimination and abuse that I'm positive women have endured in military service. And that was one part of this movie where I almost wish they would remake it in a current setting, because I wonder what that would have looked like. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I mean, God, it'd be really neat to have. It'd be really neat to have somebody who's served, like a woman who's served more recently, to be able to give some kind of insight as to how things are now by comparison. If I have any listeners that are women that have been in the military in any of the branches, if you could find one of the posts where this email is, like on Facebook or something, or where this podcast episode is, enlighten me, please. I would really like to know, because because it is like, with what I see on a movie from 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
Shut
I
up!
don't
Is
even
it
know.
really 30 years?
32
ago?
years. It's, oh man, yeah. It's 30.
Oh, I'm
30
so old.
But I mean, just to compare and contrast between that and now, I'd be really interested to know the difference.
Yeah.
We're kind of running low on time a little bit here, but some of the other things that were kind of marked down here were absolute power corrupts absolutely, which I mean, that was pretty evident with Jessup having a lot of friends in a lot of very important key places. You had mentioned that this had kind of clued you in on a better understanding of the military mindset. I think at the time, I think that would be accurate. I'm pretty sure that a lot of that is probably pretty different now. I could definitely see how it could give you a little bit more of an understanding about the culture involved, especially at that time. Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into active ingredient? Tell me, what was the active ingredient for you?
I think for me, it boils down to the very, very end, when they were acquitted and found not guilty on murder and conspiracy to commit murder, but they were found guilty on what was it?
Conduct unbecoming a Marine.
Conduct unbecoming. And then they were dishonorably discharged, and how absolutely devastated those two young men were. And the one kid, probably the lowest ranking in the movie, was like, I don't understand. And his next level of officer said, we were supposed to protect him because he couldn't protect himself. We did do something wrong because we were supposed to protect him. And like I was telling you earlier, I just recently, not super recently, but just in the last year or two, heard the term moral injury. And, it was part of a training, and it's been something that's kind of rolled around a lot for me, about this idea that, if I'm in a space where I'm required to do something that goes against my moral and ethics, it can cause a moral injury, right? And and I think this is probably that first space for me when I was very young, in a time where I was trying to figure out, what is my moral compass? What is the values and ethics that I hold most dear? And I watched this movie for the first time in high school. Well, I was deeply enthralled in marching band and that community and building, not in marching band, similar to the military, you don't set yourself apart, right? Like you do everything for the team. It is like this, it's like a football team, only I feel like it's even deeper. Like this is this common goal and this common drive. And, it really starts making you ask those kind of questions. I feel like that was a space where watching that play out in front of me made me ask myself, what does that look like for me? What would I do in that space? And how would I conduct myself in that space? Would I be strong enough to say, no, I won't fulfill that order, knowing the consequences and what that could mean for me in a space where if you don't follow orders, people die, And thankfully, I've never been in that deep of a situation where it was like that. But how do you stand up for somebody else? How do you protect those around you from bullying? And how do you make sure you don't participate in it, even if it's what everyone around you expects, And then, you fast forward lots of years and it does make you think about trust in leadership and, do I want to invest my time into things where I don't trust those who are in charge, and if I am in charge, how do I be trustworthy? How do I make sure that the people that work with me know that they can trust that I am not looking out for myself, that I'm looking out for the best interest of the people that we serve and the people that I serve with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, it's very similar. As humans, we kind of have a duty to protect each other. I mean, that's part of what makes a human community. It doesn't matter if you're in a different neighborhood or a different city or a different state or any of that stuff. People who can be hundreds of miles away from us can still be a part of the human community. Mm-hmm. And there's something in it kind of brings the golden rule into it. What would you want? We have a duty as humans to protect humans. That always kind of comes back again to my job. My job is to help fellow humans. Sometimes you have to make a decision for what I call RTTD, right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing to do is not what is expected of you, because the unfortunate thing about systems is that systems make rules and things that are made to protect the system and not the people. So sometimes a decision has to be made where you're making the decision on behalf of the person and not the system. That is where this movie spoke to me, was trying to differentiate between what is your duty, what is expected of you by the system, and what the right thing to do is. Mm-hmm. It's funny because, I say that the difference is, life and death. In the Marines, you follow your orders because somebody could die. In the job that I do, it's kind of the opposite, where if you follow orders and don't do the right thing to do, somebody could die. Mm-hmm. For a completely different reason, but it's a very real truth, and I have seen it, and it sticks with me.
Yeah. Well, and I think, at the end of the day, I feel like that is, I hear so often, the country's going to hell in a handbasket. What's wrong with the world today? And all of these things. And if I could boil it down to one thing, it feels like it really is that self-serving motivation. You know what I mean? Is that the difference between 1950 and 2024? I don't know. Were people more giving and more neighborly and more globally minded in the 50s than they are today? I don't know. But it certainly seems like so often those places where maybe the people who aren't being protected because it comes at a cost for someone else. And I do think that there was a time, even when I was a kid, where our neighbors were trusted. I know that if mom and dad weren't home and the house was locked, I could go next door to Mr. and Mrs. Bacon's house, and they would let me hang out in their house for a few hours, and I could play with their dog, and no one would be upset, and I had no fear that I would be harmed there. And if that didn't...
Mr. and Mrs. Kevin Bacon?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's probably going to be 12 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon on this one, but unless the last name is enough of a connection, maybe.
I totally remember Mr. Bacon. I don't remember much of Mrs. Bacon.
Well, and here's the thing. Why I wouldn't be scared of the guy that had deer hanging in his garage in the middle of November every year is beyond me. But but you know, and if Mr. and Mrs. Bacon weren't home, there was plenty of other neighbors. You know, my teacher lived across the street, and you know, it was different. It felt different. There wasn't fear that we couldn't go out, and of course, I am well aware that that's small town, middle of the Midwest, right? And in big cities, maybe it's always been a little different. But I do feel like we are in a space where it is less common to look out for one another than it used to be. And that's a sad thing to me. I think
George Carlin at one point had said, he had said, hey, remember a time when we didn't have to have a tragedy to give a shit about one another,
to bring us together. Yeah.
And that was right after 9/11. He had an HBO special that he said that, and it was like, God, he's so right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the one time that you really get to see that humanity out of people, is when some awful tragic thing happens.
And that's, I think, and I've said it a million times, what makes me so sad is that the things that divide us are so much fewer than the things that unite us. You know what I mean? The things that bring us together and make us the same, that make us a community, are so much stronger than the things that make us different. And I am hopeful that this is just a space, that this is an era, that this is a time where, you know, things feel so divisive and ugly and awful. And I don't know what it will take to shift it back to a space where we can, I don't feel like there is a space to unite ever. You know what I mean? And we've had some pretty traumatic things happen in this country, and those things really just drove us farther apart. Whereas not all that many years ago, when there were attacks on this soil, we did come together. Didn't matter your political party, didn't matter your religion, didn't matter, your belief system. We were Americans, and we were all in it together. We stood together, and that didn't happen this last big event. You know what I mean? It really was very different during the pandemic, and that's kind of a scary place to be. And I hope it doesn't stay that way. So
the moral of the story is that to any of my listeners, be human and be a part of the human community.
Do the good and right thing.
Yeah. RTTD, right thing to do. Just remember that. Well, that's about all the time I got for this one, Jamie. I thank you very much for coming on for this one. It's a good one.
It's such a good movie.
Oh yeah. But I'm sure I'll have you back on relatively soon. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Of course. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Please slide over to Roundtable Mindset Podcast on your preferred platform and check it out. Jamie and Malin's show. It's really thought-provoking. And actually, it's kind of similar to the sort of topics that we talked about in the movie that we were covering today. Now, if you have a movie that healed you, or you have a movie to challenge me to try to find a deeper meaning or a deeper purpose in, or even if you want to be on the show, send an email to contact@movie-rx.com. You can also send a text or call 402-519-5790. Remember, this movie is not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And thank you again for listening, and we'll see you at the next appointment.